22nd is hereby called to order. Let's stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's begin the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members of Council have received the minutes from the regular meeting January 7th. Are there any questions, additions, concerns? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. We'll now move on to public comment. This portion of the agenda is designed for members of the general public to share their thoughts on items of interest in the community. Council members may ask clarifying questions or discuss procedural matters, but are not permitted to discuss the policy merits of any issue unless it is scheduled for discussion. Each speaker will have 1 minute.
All right, first speaker, Tim Ross, followed by Catherine Joswick.
Tim Ross, in the county, address Charlestown. Just wanted to say, hey, I'm for the resolution by the mayor. I'm against the sewer. I sent a letter off to the DEP today commenting about their terrible transcripts of the hearing they had back in December. If you haven't read them, I suggest you do, because it just shows the level of care and work that they put into their concerning us, which is zero. The thing said, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Department of Environmental Protection, Charlestown, one word. I checked, I think it's been like 100 or so years since it's been one word. They didn't even get rock wool right. Everywhere it says rock wool, they put in rock well. So I sent that off to Rockwell Automation over in Pennsylvania and just see what they think of it. But at any rate, you got to look, if they can't do that right, if they can't spell your name right, they're not going to do a very good job on the permit. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Catherine Joswick, and then Nikki Heim.
Thanks for letting us speak once again. I'd like to say that Catherine Joswick, Harpers Ferry. I'd just like to say that I support the statement against Rockwell. And I'd also like to say that hopefully I'm wrong. I was reading that statement as possible cover in case you were planning to vote affirmatively on the sewer bond. I'd like to say I still object to the sewer bond. And this deal was brought to us in an underhanded way. And you don't even have all the facts about what would be discharged in the sewer. And in addition, in case you're believing the corporate spin that all of this is okay for us, I brought you a little editorial about air pollution levels and how children are affected even at the permitted levels right now. So yes on the statement opposing Rockwell, and no on the sewer.
Thank you.
Nikki Heim, and then Diane Blust.
Good evening, everyone. I actually sent you guys the email earlier today. I'm sure most of you got it, with a 51-page document that laid out a bunch of quotes and proof about a lot of the misinformation that we've been receiving. So I hope you have a chance to look at that. I also printed a copy to leave with you as well. I did a search today, and I found an email that I remember seeing a while ago that was interesting. It was from Andy Blake to a couple people within the city, and it says, the owner of Jefferson Orchards has 265 acres remaining, just bought 300 additional acres to the north he wants to annex, and there is an additional 400 acres of land across Route 9. The state, Rockwell, and its site selector, Deloitte, have all stated that this is perfect flat area for future industrial sites. So that, if you do all the numbers and add it all up, that's a little over 1,000 acres that they are planning to turn into industrial sites. And I did some math, and I found out 1,000 acres is approximately 900 football fields. It's 55 super Walmarts with parking lots,
Ma'am,
Central
thank you
Park-
for your comments.
Okay.
Next up, Diane Blust and then Jamie Gregory.
Good evening. I have 3 minutes, so I will make this as short as I can. My name is Diane Blust. I live in the county. I'm urging you to vote against Rockwool and to vote against the sewer bond. But what I really wanted to talk to you about tonight was sustainability and resiliency in the face of climate change. We got 2 major reports at the end of last year about climate change. If we don't address it, we will leave nothing for our children and our grandchildren. So it's up to us, the people sitting in this room, people in positions of power, to address it. I'd like to ask you to think about having a sustainability or resiliency working group to formulate a sustainability plan for the city, and hopefully you can lead the county in doing this. Rockwool is anything but sustainable, just as not all food is good, not all insulation is good. When you have to use thousands of pounds of coal, tons of coal, to produce the insulation, it's not a green product. It's also not a green product if you're going to be sucking our aquifers dry. So please, think about sustainability.
Jamie Gregory and then Nicola.
I would also urge you to do everything within your power to come out against Rockwool. They would like you to think, like us to think, that we're the only people on the planet who have ever had an objection. I can't read Croatian or Serbian, but that picture was not taken in Jefferson County. That's over in Europe. Since I only have a minute, I'll refer to more research that actually is sort of spurred by the United States and somewhat by our own objections to Rockwool, where there's more research going on into the process of making wool rock. The process being one that, you know, as we've probably heard many times, tons and tons of things that are going into the atmosphere. In particulate matter, no pun intended, particulate matter in particular, is something that the research is not well known on, although that again is...
Thank you for your comments.
Yes. Can I give you this?
My name is Nicola Bastian, and I look around here and I wonder that in all these meetings that we've been in, I only know a couple of people and where they stand and why they stand. Which brings me to the point that I think it is high time, before we do any motion on anything, that we all get together and pool the resources. You have an incredible body of researchers behind me. They need to put into your decision. Now they come and they make speeches and there's no discussion. Let us have a seminar. Let us have a Saturday seminar where everybody can get to know, and I can get to know where you stand, why you stand. This is a democracy. This means people need to be, this is small enough community for all of us to realize we're in the same boat. Let us get together.
Thank you for your comments.
Next up, Dennis Flynn and then Chris Kinnan. Dennis Flynn. All right, Chris Kinnan.
Chris Kinnan. Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Kinnan. I live in Jefferson County. I'm a parent. I'm also a board member of Jefferson County Vision. I'm here tonight to thank you all for your continued diligence and integrity on this issue, that you all at Charlestown were some of the first to really listen when this all unveiled this summer, and we began to realize that what we had been told about this project and the Scandinavian green, it actually isn't. And through all of this, we realized that there's really still no benefit. There's no benefit to putting this kind of heavy industry in our community next to our schools. The other point is that we continue to grow as a movement. We filed today at the PSC a complaint against the unlawful move to build the water line. The project has changed ownership, it's changed financing. This has to absolutely be reviewed by the PSC. And then you all know about the gas decision as well. And so these things are very much more in play than they've ever been. So thank you all for your continued diligence and resolution opposing Rockwool and opposing the industrial sewer.
Thank you.
Next up, Nancy Gregory and then Dan Casto.
We're just doing.
I guess you like to go home at a reasonable hour. Okay, so I believe in science. I believe in climate change, the periodic table, chemistry, and also gravity, and that what goes up and out of 220-foot smokestacks must come down somewhere nearby. I believe the information about sinkhole contamination and pollution-related cancer. I believe that everyone does not act with honesty and integrity, such as those officials who brought this industry into this county under a veil of secrecy and deception, and who still fight against the majority of citizens to push for a factory that has been shown to have clear dangers and high-risk potential. I believe in smart development and job creation through light and low-impact industry. Frontline is airing a show tonight about the failure of the U.S. to regulate polluters. There are states that are enforcing higher standards for pollution than the EPA and their DEPs. West Virginia, by permitting Rockwool and Jefferson County, would be going backwards. Frack gas, coal, maybe petroleum coke to power the plant. Those are greenhouse gases that many countries are phasing out, including Denmark, the country where Rockwool originates. There's chemical pollution like formaldehyde that is banned in Denmark. I haven't heard one convincing reason to have this plan here. Accusations of being anti-jobs is ridiculous and rather mundane. I've heard many reasons not to permit it here.
Ma'am, thank you for your comments.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next up, Dan Casto and Sean Amos.
Thank you, Dan Casto, President Jefferson County Prosperity, a resident of Charlestown, I believe the first one to actually be here tonight. The difference between Jefferson County Prosperity's view on Rockwool and the views that are being expressed tonight is Jefferson County Prosperity believes you should actually follow the law, which is the oath that you took. You'll see West Virginia Code 2432 says no public utility may subject any corporation to any undue or unreasonable prejudice or disadvantage in any respect whatsoever. That's exactly what you, or some of you, are proposing that you do. Violate the constitutional rights of a user. It's wrong, and it's time to stop tonight, and that you be the adults in the room and tell folks, sorry, the law is what the law is. We also have proposed an alternate statement regarding Rockwool that we would request that you look at. We would also request that you delay any action on the statement tonight to allow a workshop for the public to come in, all sides to come in and express their views on Rockwool. There's no reason to adopt the statement tonight. Thank you.
Sean Amos and then Sharon Wilt.
My name is Sean Amos. I'm from Harpers Ferry, and if we want to talk about what's really lawful, we would need to decide who is going to make those decisions about what's lawful and what is not. We have heard from these people over and over again that if you don't finance this sewer line, that you could be sued for all of this money. Well, has anybody sent a summons to Patsy or to Nick for not putting the water line out there? No? Well, they had an agreement to do that too. Have they sued them? No, they haven't. Our job as citizens and your job as our elected officials is not to adjudicate. Your job is to form laws, to pass ordinances, and to decide what's best for the people of the county and of your city. It is not your job. You can hire a lawyer to tell you anything, and the lawyers that you have been using are the same ones that are informing these people. It is time for you guys to look into your heart and ask yourself if it really is what's best for this county or not. If they were going to sue somebody, they would have sued the JCDA when they didn't put the water line out there. They did not sue them. You've seen all the filth that's coming out of this thing down your sewer. You decide if that's what's best.
Next up, Sharon Wilt. And then Kirsten Lee.
I'm sorry, did you say something?
Sharon Wilt and then Kirsten Lee.
Okay. Mayor Rogers and all council members, I'm here tonight to fully support any action taken to stop Rockwool. Heavy industry of any kind has no place in Jefferson County. North Jefferson Elementary School in Fox Glen Housing Development is directly across the street. 50 to 60% of North Jefferson Elementary are children that live in Fox Glen. These children will be in the pollution 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mayor Rogers and council members, you were deceived along with Jefferson County residents. Please take any and all action to stop Rockwell from destroying our home. No smokestacks wanted, no industrial waste. Sewer rules. They do define commercial service and residential service. There is no definition for industrial service. Say no to Route 9 sewer line. And just a side note, the complete list of all materials safety data sheets is required before approval and permits are issued. We have no material safety data sheets. We don't know what's going down that sewer line.
Thank you.
All right, Kirsten Lee, and then is it Chris Pilark?
All right. I stand in complete support of your proposed resolution against not just Rockwell, but against bringing in all heavy industry. Allowing polluting factories into Jefferson County will damage existing businesses and discourage many more from being created. Smart development is crucial to our county's future prosperity. Heavy industry is a giant step backwards economically as well as environmentally. And for what? Bjorn stated that only around $10 million of the initial $150 million initially promised is actually going to the community. The rest was for their special machinery. I also encourage each city council member to vote no on the sewer bond. At the West Virginia DEP hearing, speaker after speaker asked valid questions and brought up hard scientific reasons why the permit should not be granted. I encourage you to investigate it thoroughly. I'm including a handful of them in my written statement. None of these have been addressed. Recent failures in the current system were brought up. FOIA searches continue to reveal irregularities and downright illegalities within the process. Moving forward in the face of so much uncertainty is foolhardy and irresponsible. Rockwell has been caught in many documentable inconsistencies and outright lies. They have shown an inability to meet the terms and conditions necessary to ensure environmental and public safety. The DEP representative stated that you're under no obligation to grant them a sewer line, and we implore you all to deny the bond.
Next up is Chris Pilark. Am I saying that correct? And then Anastasia Tab.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name's Chris Palank. I'm a resident in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. I've lived in Shepherdstown for almost 40 years. This is the first time that I've spoken publicly on this issue of Rockwell. I urge all of you to oppose Rockwell, make a policy statement saying as such, as well as vote no on the sewer bond. The reason that I am speaking tonight is because you've heard from all of these really, really smart people, and they are really, really smart in terms of all of their education and their research. I am not that smart. I am a nurse practitioner. I am in healthcare. I am in total awe of this community, total awe, and I think you need to listen to them. This industry progression has gone on too long. I never, ever looked at Jefferson County and thought for a minute that I would be up here speaking against heavy industry and pollution in our beautiful county. I urge all of you to vote no on the sewage bond, and I also want to make it clear that this whole agenda, this whole Rockwell agenda, is really due to the state agenda of coal. And why we don't see through this, no one needs a PhD to understand that this is a state agenda.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Anastasia Tab. And then after that, Jay Mansfield.
Good evening. Two things that are on your agenda that I'd like to speak about. I appreciate you considering a resolution against Rockwell. I think that sets a precedent for that you are against heavy industry in our county. And two, against the sewer bond that you vote a no. We don't have to accept this. Back in January of 2017, before any of us had the chance to oppose any of this, a lot of the state offices got together with the JCDA and other community entities such as Ranson. They made this decision. Ranson started changing ordinances and making resolutions before the project was even publicly announced. None of us would have expected this. Whenever the JCC tells us, do you understand the comprehensive plans and the maps, and this is Ranson's area, Ranson has a comprehensive plan. I did make myself knowledgeable of it. I've been reading through it. There's several discrepancies in there that go against Rockwell and heavy industry where it's located. We are not going to stop.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Jay Mansfield and then Lee Smith.
My name's Jay Mansfield. I'm from Shepherdstown. The county mandates that people receive water and sewer service, but they don't mandate that we receive air that we can breathe. Our African-American population is situated right in the middle of the hot zone of where the Rockwell is located. Families of color suffer 3 times higher incidence and prevalence of asthma and die 30 times more often than white kids from asthma complications. The people living near the Rockwell plant won't have any fresh air. None. The truth is Rockwell will make the air 20 to 30,000 times more polluted. What about safety? If something's 20,000 times hotter or colder, is it safe? 20,000 times louder, is it safe? 20,000 times more polluted, is it safe? No. You cannot support the safety of our children and support the goals of the Board of Education and allow Rockwell to proceed with their development. Be brave, stand with us, we have your back, stand up for us and resist all movement forward on the Rockwell development. Freeze out these heavy polluters until they leave. Thank you.
Keith Smith and Gina Biller.
Hi, my name is Lee Smith. I am with Jefferson County Vision, and we are an organization that absolutely supports responsible development. I'm not a Charlestown resident, but I live in Ranson, which is surrounded by Charlestown, so your decisions affect us greatly. And to be real, like, in the county, air doesn't stop at municipality borders, so, you know, we all need to work together to save this county. I would like to ask you to vote to pass a resolution opposing Rockwell and stand with the majority of your citizens and the citizens of the surrounding cities and counties, and the county. I would also like to ask you to please vote no on the sewer bond when that issue comes to a vote. I have statements here from some of our supporters who couldn't make the meeting tonight. Who should I give that to? Thank you. Just wanted their voices to be heard as well. Thank you for your time, and thank you for always allowing us to speak. Thank you.
Gina Biller, then Jennifer King.
Hi, I'm Gina Biller. I've been here for 50 years. I really am surprised that this has all come through and this is happening. I don't have a planned speech. I'm just begging you to please say no on the bond. There's no way that we can live out here next to that. I'm a mile and a half from that. It's going to affect our wells. It's going to affect our breathing. Anybody that's environmentally conscious won't be able to grow their own food. We won't be able to live here. There's other people like me too that do have the means and will just have to leave, but I'm so sorry that we have to, because I really hope that you will take a second look and look, this should have never come through. I've always admired Jefferson County, how they have stood up and you know, don't allow things to just happen like that. I couldn't have as little stained glass repairs in my shop without the Jefferson County Planning Commission coming down my back because I put my phone number out there, you know, because I'm not zoned for that. And to allow something in this heavy industry, there's no room in Jefferson County for it. And you're going to lose a lot of good people. It's just not a good place for it. It's good. And being with FEMA for 18 years, I can tell you that an explosion, it's not a matter of when it's going to, if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when.
Thank you.
Jennifer King and then Barbara Fuller.
Hi, good evening. It is not clear why IJDC would grant additional funds to cover the cost of Ranson's engineering cost if those costs were already included in the original Schedule B funding that was submitted to CTUB last July. It is also not clear why Charlestown would not own the sewer plans through the consolidation. It's like the plans are being held hostage until you vote yes on the bond. How can you vote on a project and not see the plans? According to the Route 9 sewer shed study found in the Ransom FOIAs, the numbers are significantly higher coming out of Rockwell, the waste. So I'm disturbed that these engineering plans call for higher sewage than what CTUB has submitted, and I have all the supporting document here. Let's see. I'm still learning all the Charlestown's departments and all their duties, but it seems odd to me that the Building Commission would oversee the funding to the Rockwell Sewer Project. Why not CTUB? Is it because CTUB has debt and therefore it cannot be assigned to them? Is this a loophole, and is this designed by who? Part of my research is going...
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. It was like 3 minutes long. I'm trying to tear it down.
And is it Barbara Fuller?
Good evening. I'm Barbara Fuller. I'm a resident of Jefferson County in Kearneysville. I'm also the Secretary of Jefferson County Prosperity. Thank you for taking time to hear my comments. It is my understanding it is not whether Rockwell gets sewer or not, but how it will be funded and how the infrastructure will be expanded to service new and existing customers in the area. Per the agreement, I believe legally the city must provide Rockwell with a sewer via the 5.5 May line extension. Now, I know this is only dealing with the sewer side, but as they have already struck an agreement with JUI for water. But I believe the alternative to a 0 or 1% state bond would also be a 5.5 mainline extension that would only service Rockwell's needs and not address the larger issues. We could also hope that Rockwell would be willing to finance the entire project themselves like they did the water. But is that a risk the City Council is willing to make? They will need to explain to the ratepayers if the gamble doesn't pay off.
Thank you for your comments.
So do we have no other speakers?
No others, okay. We'll go on to reports. We have Mayor's report. I have nothing today. Let's go to Ward 1.
Last Thursday, I was interviewed by the County Commission for the city's position for the Jefferson County Development Authority. I reminded the Commission that the city approved on November 19th a guidance for their representative for the Jefferson County Development Authority, and I told them that I agreed with that guidance, and if selected, I would work to see that all its items were realized. I then sent them a copy of the document the next morning and reiterated that I would work to implement it. Let's see. Then the question came up, was raised as whether if I were selected, could I continue to serve as the city's representative once I leave council in May? The answer from the County Commission staff was yes, although we may want to confirm that. But if that is the continued intention of the City Council. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ward 2. Ward 3. Ward 4.
I have nothing to pass. I attended the Charlestown Utility Board meeting on January 9th, where they discussed many of the questions that the City Council sent towards them, and I believe it's in our packet. The next meeting is tomorrow at 4 p.m. right here. Attended the personnel handbook rollout training.
I did too. I should have mentioned that. Sorry.
So did I.
I know. I was waiting for you guys to say it.
I forgot.
As a member of the personnel committee, I attended and answered a few questions, and we got some really good notes, and there may be some changes coming, minor changes in that. And also, if you want to see me act on stage, I will be in the production of Looking at the Old Opera House, February 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 8th, 9th, and 10th. I have a leading role in this one, so I'm on stage a lot this time. So you'll get an entertaining evening, I'll tell you that.
Very good. Okay, we'll move on to committee reports. And we have a Finance Committee report today.
Passed out the minutes on Saturday, emailed to everybody. If anybody had any questions, it's kind of self-explanatory, but I'll answer any questions that you might have.
All right. No further discussion. We'll move on. Thank you, Bob. Let's move on to the City Manager's report.
So the only thing I want to remind folks is that we are looking to do appointments to the boards and commissions at the next meeting. So we'll have 3 from the Parks and Rec Board. We'll have 2 with the BZA, and we have 1 with the Planning Commission. So again, if you know of anybody who might be interested, please encourage them to submit an application. And the application, basically a resume and a letter of interest and qualifications. And like I said, we hope to bring that back at the next meeting.
And I noticed those are on the website, correct?
They are.
Very good. Thank you, Darrell. Let's move on to the Police Chief's report.
I have nothing.
All right. Always good. Okay, so we're going to move on to 3163 Route 9 sewer line vote schedule. I will say this, following that, I'm going to change the agenda around a bit, and we will go on to the city statement on proposed Rockwell facility. For right now, let's bring up 3163 Route 9 sewer line vote schedule follow-up.
All right, so this is follow-up, obviously, to the last meeting we had. There were 3 questions that were requested. We've had the Charlestown Utility Board do the research on those questions, and so we'll have Kristen come up to do an explanation on that. We did also get a request for the loan agreement or the form of the loan agreement. As you can see in the packet, we don't have that yet, but that request has been put into the West Virginia Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council. So we don't have that piece of information yet, but hopefully we can address other questions that were asked. So with that, Kristen, if you'll come on up. She will, I think, be referring to this map that's behind us here. Each of the members also has a copy of that map on their desk.
Good evening. So certainly as a follow-up to the last City Council meeting, we wanted to address some of the specific questions that you had regarding the financing for the Route 9 sewer project, as well as some definitions and other items that we had previously presented. What I wanted to do was prepare an exhibit to demonstrate where the Route 9 sewer project is going, the customers that it would serve as currently designed. As you can see, the sewer project serves much more than the Rockwool facility. The line is designed for approximately 900,000 gallons per day. So that addresses largely the industrial park, the Jefferson Orchards property, and adjacent properties, several residential developments, all the way from the Jefferson Orchards property down to Fairfax Crossing, which is the tie-in. So certainly happy to answer any questions with regard to that exhibit, but hopefully that will provide a little bit more clarity on the current design. The summary that we've prepared addresses the funding option, the state funding option, and alternative options for providing Rockwool sewer capacity. So state funding option, currently the commitment is $10.5 million for a term of 30 years, no impact to the ratepayers for the total project costs, and the operation and maintenance costs are retained by the utility board to maintain the system. Any unpaid balance at the end of the 30-year term is forgiven. One thing we did want to address is that we did an evaluation of the original commitment letter, which was $9 million for 20 years, compared to the current commitment of $10.5 million over 30 years, and essentially what that would work, the difference would work out to about 23 years, 3 months. So maybe something to consider in negotiating with the state as to where we end up with the 30-year commitment term. I know, Mr. Trainer, that was one of your questions at some point, so we did want to provide that comparison. There are other options for the financing of the sewer line, a main line extension agreement, Rule 5.5. We've gone through that extensively. We did want to provide essentially two potential options under that main line extension agreement. One is current design. The second option would be a line that would only serve Rockwool. So there are ratepayer impacts with regard to the option one, which is the sewer project as currently designed. Those are detailed here. Happy to address any questions on that. Option two would then be a line that would just be sized for Rockwool. So that has not been, we have not gone through the calculations of what that would be. Engineering would be required to evaluate that option and the rate impact associated with that. There was one question, I believe, by Councilman Brittingham regarding the ability of the utility board to go back to the PSC and ask for relief from for additional costs. So with the mainline extension agreement, utility board does not get the operation and maintenance costs associated with the line during the term of the agreement. I have spoken with a senior PSC staff member, and their opinion. They cannot speak for the commission, but they would, their opinion would be that they would deny the utility board that request based on alternative funding being available. Then getting into the alternate mainline extension agreement, that is a mutual agreement between the utility board and the developer. So that's another option, but at this point, you know, we haven't evaluated that with the developer to determine where that option would end up with regard to rate impacts or, you know, the developer covering costs and the term of that option. So just wanted to address that. Permitting, we do not have any updates on the issuance of the permit at this point. We're waiting on DEP to issue the permit modification with any conditions. We did want to make note that if the DEP permit is not issued, if the modification is not issued, the financing commitment from the state would not be available, nor would sewer availability, as that was a condition of the sewer availability letter by the utility board. Then getting into a few of the questions. I don't know whether you want me to go through these specific questions or if, okay. So the first question, it was, is the utility board obligated to modify the permit to accept industrial waste? The answer is yes. The utility board is obligated to provide service as contained in Chapter 24, Article 3. We've attached those requirements. The permit modification is required as part of the provision to provide the service to any industrial customer or any customer. The DEP processes obligate the filing of the permit renewal application 6 months prior to the expiration of the permit, and we would then require any permit modifications for major changes in the system. If the permit modification is returned to the utility board by DEP, we would have to respond and provide any additional information if they had questions. We would still remain under the obligation to provide the service until such time as DEP would deny the permit. And that is, you know, we're still waiting for the response from DEP.
So let me go back just a little bit. You mentioned that if DEP does not issue the permit, then the funding for the sewer line goes away.
That's correct. We have to have all permits in hand in order to obtain the state financing commitment.
Which is logical.
For instance, DEP permit, railroad permits, all of that.
But they could appeal the decision, correct? Or pre-treat or something else?
Correct.
So if the funding, though, if the state backs out of the funding, there's a, you know, the big white elephant in the room is the $1 million of Ranson.
The project costs would have to be addressed.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Kristen.
Yes.
2 questions. First, through no fault of his own and through my fault, I received some additional information on the 5.5 issue, and I would like to submit it for Mr. Levy and ask that you do a review. You did provide some information here, but there were some additional issues that I'd like some clarification on, because I'd like to get this issue really nailed down and there be no issues with that. Secondly, I think I asked last time, and the answer was that very little work had been done on the analysis and the work for the Flowing Springs project. Where are we on that?
Again, we're waiting on a direction with regard to the Route 9 sewer project to determine how, in what form the Flowing Springs project would need to be to address the capacity issues in the region.
So we have the Route 9 line and the Flowing Springs line and the consolidation. All 3 of those issues?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And with regard to your first question, certainly if you have additional information that you'd like clarification on, just please provide it in writing. Daryl can get it to us at the board meeting tomorrow and
I'll
happy
get
to
it to
address.
Thank you.
And I just want to clarify, so this is in addition to the comments that he previously raised, because they have done an analysis on those earlier
Yes,
issues.
It is a, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is the Charlestown Utility Board obligated to accept industrial waste? We are required to accept industrial waste unless there is a negative impact on our system. So again, DEP is evaluating any potential impacts with the permit modification. Unless there is an impact to our system, we are absolutely required to accept industrial waste. We cannot legally deny service to a new customer in the event even that we had capacity issues or that there were impacts. The developer would be responsible for covering those costs, and at that point we would be required to provide service. Any questions on that?
Guess we can move to 3.
Sure. Please provide a clear definition of customer. Are industrial customers different from residential and commercial customers? Customer in the PSC rules is defined as any such person, firm, corporation, municipality, public service district, or any other entity who purchases a product or services of any utility and shall include any such person, firm, corporation, municipality, public service district, or any other entity who purchases services or product for resale. The sewer rules do define commercial and residential services, but there is no definition or distinction for an industrial service. The assertion that sewer rule 5.5 does not apply to industrial customers, I think that was a comment that was made. We do not agree with that. There's nothing in the statute that governs, in the governing rules, that would differentiate between industrial customers. Next question was a need for a clear definition of industrial waste versus domestic waste. Again, the PSC rules do not differentiate between any industrial or domestic waste. Essentially, sewer that goes into the sewer infrastructure is waste, and it's dealt with through the DEP regulations.
So why do we need this variance then, this permit? You know what I'm saying?
Correct. So the permit modification addresses an industrial user. It's no different than the PSD has 5 industrial users. It's just it's a way to monitor the effluent from something other than a domestic use. For instance,
we talked about 2. Well,
Okay.
There you go. I mean, that's right there. But we talked about 2 streams always on this particular project, right? There was the industrial waste stream, and then there was the domestic waste stream. So there's got to be some kind of difference there.
Well, the utility board requested that Rockwell provide 2 separate monitoring devices on the domestic flow, so we could evaluate that, as well as the industrial flow. Those go through those flow monitoring devices into a single line. So they essentially come within the building, the large footprint, those come into a single line out of the building.
Why would we need it if there's no difference between the waste streams?
The PSC does not have a definition. DEP does have a definition.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you. That clarifies.
I was like, oh, that's what.
Move on to 5.
Sure. So our environmental attorney, Richard Lewis, sent 4 cases that pertain to the utility board's obligation to provide service to customers. There was a question about what case law would be available dealing with industrial users. The PSC rules define an applicant applying for service as a person, firm, corporation, municipality, PSD, or any other entity that applies for sewer service. So there's no distinction made between an applicant that is applying for, say, domestic or residential, commercial, or industrial service. The PSC case law does not distinguish a public utilities service obligation based on the type of service. So therefore, we were not able, can't say that there is no case law, but most cases apply for the generic applicant requesting service. Hopefully that clarifies that issue. And then the only other item we did want to cover with regard to the loan agreement, I believe that you're working with John Stump on a response, but we have an ongoing conference call with the state to give updates on the financing. So per the IJDC legal counsel, the lease agreement is between council and the building commission. Upon approval of the state financing, we would then be able to go to bid. At that point, once we have final bids and we know the final number of the financing, the loan agreement would be finalized and sent to the building commission for signature. That is standard practice and has been done through many other SRF projects that Charlestown has done. So that's not uncommon. Just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Right, so, and John Stump is asking that we accelerate that a little bit because he knows that we have council members asking to at least see the form of the loan agreement.
All right, any additional questions for Christian?
I just wanted to clarify the timing of voting between the, and maybe you can't answer, maybe it's not you to answer the question, but it has to do with the building commission's vote versus the city council's vote. Is the city council votes first and then the building commissioner, or is it the other way around?
So we've set up the schedule so the so the city council would vote first. Because again, what we would like is the city council, basically it's a vote to authorize the building commission to issue the bonds and to enter into a lease agreement. And we really think that it's important that the city council, determine the policy direction of the city before the transactional work of the building commission is done.
Okay, thank you.
All my questions are about the spreadsheet analysis. I don't know if I should be directing that to Mr. Kunkel or you.
Well, he is the one that prepared the analysis. We can certainly try to work through those questions.
Are there any other questions on the other items before we jump to that analysis?
Just one more. February of 2017, the Public Service Commission hearing down in Charleston on the Flowing Springs project. The one thing in watching that I learned was that a sewer line does not get used all the time. In other words, there's not constantly stuff flowing through this pipe. It's the pumps are turned on at a certain point when you've accumulated so much waste within the pump stations. So you've built a line, you've designed this line to be, you said, for 900,000 gallons a day?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the current capacity, or what is the current usage of all of these customers now?
There would be some immediate customers. Ideally, you'd have Rockwool, which would be a customer, and then immediate flows into the line with the connection of the industrial park. There are other developments that are not currently built out, but there's the provision for upgrading to, there's a series of force mains, so a smaller force main going to a larger, so we have the ability to utilize a smaller line in the short term and serve ultimate build out within the various force main lines.
So right now, other than Rockwool, there will be no one else on that line.
Well, now that the provision was made in the sewer design to immediately connect the industrial park. So you'd have all of the industrial park flows. You'd have flows from, for instance, the Jefferson High School. So no, I mean, there will absolutely be immediate flows connected now that we have the Public Service District customers. We can make that connection.
And those customers will not be impacted by the rate, the existing customers.
The existing customers would not contribute to the revenue repayment of this particular item because those customers are already attributed to the PSD bonds.
So if Rockwell went and we built a line only for Rockwell, there would still be capacity that you would be pumping through that line because Rockwell won't be using that line 24 hours a day, correct?
No, you can't look at it from that perspective. You have to basically assume that the capacity in the line is to serve a particular customer. So to get to the point to say that you would pump from another location in the time that Rockwell wasn't using it, you can't anticipate that. You have to designate capacities in the line strictly for a particular user.
Okay, no, that makes sense. But just to be clear, all of these yellow sections then, there is right now, except for Burr and maybe with Jefferson High School, there is none of this has been built out yet. This is all planned.
Well, correct. I mean, there are a number of other PSD users that exist that would connect into the line. I don't have those right in front of me, but we did a detailed analysis based on the sewer design, and that is what's shown on the exhibit.
And Harvest Mills, that's all the way on.
Harvest Mills is not currently developed.
But is that, would that be incorporated into the Flowing Springs line, or is that into the Route 9 line?
We would anticipate that with this design, Harvest Hills would connect in and be required to extend service to their property. The developer would be required to do that and connect into this main extension.
As opposed to Flowing Springs.
That is the current plan.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? So based on what you just said, so that's if the current engineering plan is all those good things where we're going to tie in Burr Industrial and all that. And 5.5 won't do that? Is that what we're saying?
There's two options under 5.5.
Let's go to the first 5.5, not the alternate, but just the first one.
Okay, so the first 5.5, there's still two options. It could be project as designed, or it could be Rockwell could come and say, we only want to pay for a line that will serve our building.
So let's say that they come back and say, okay, if for some reason the bond thing doesn't work out, and they go, okay, well, we'll build it just like you have it designed, would the people that we connect then, like Burr Industrial, would their rates be impacted by that project?
I can't, yes. I mean, we've defined, and John Kunkel can go through that. There would be an impact to the ratepayers based on Rule 5.5.
Be an impact for all ratepayers,
yes.
not just.
Right, but I mean, they're hooking up. So right now, if the bond goes through, you're going through the industrial park, no rate impact to those existing customers. If you do a 5.5 alternative, I guess, where the company or the entity decides to do it just as designed, then there would be a rate impact.
Yes.
Thank you.
If it's a lower cost alternative project, that doesn't really alter the reimbursement method. New customers connected onto that smaller design line would still be required to reimburse.
Right, I was saying, if he had built it as designed. And I appreciate all the work that you've done to put this together. It's good information, appreciate it.
So but you're saying, John, new customers, correct?
Correct.
because I really want to nail this down. Existing customers, what will be the impact?
Under option 1, which is the,
Both option 1 and option 2. Is there any?
It would be a rate impact in either scenario for all.
And could you go through that again? Why?
Well, the line would, the utility board would be required to fund under Rule 5.5 approximately $442,000 and the O&M costs. So that would have to be attributed to all of the customers in that scenario.
So the O&M, you said, so that's $500,000 plus the O&M.
Actually, right. Well, no, that's just the utility funded portion under Rule 5.5 is approximately $442,000. The O&M costs above and beyond the leak adjustment, which we did do a revised analysis on that, the impact is $1.5 million. So essentially what it ends up being is a 42-cent impact to all ratepayers.
And that million that you just mentioned, and that is, how does that come out in terms of the ransom $1 million?
It does, that is strictly an O&M calculation on the sewer line as designed, based on 61% of the revenues going into the line. Doesn't have anything to do with the project costs.
Okay.
And Kristen, just to make sure, we're 42 cents per thousand?
42 cents per 1,000 gallons per month.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
That's basically what this analysis is showing, right, Mr. Kunkel, is the 5.5 agreement, if the project costs were $10 million, and if Rockwell was putting down the deposit and we were paying our cash portion, correct?
That's right. The utility board would incur 42 cents per thousand usage, which is not built into the current rates.
Okay. And I apologize for anybody in the audience, because without the agenda packet, this is going to be a really boring conversation. It's all about the numbers on this spreadsheet. But do you have the spreadsheet, Mr. Kunkel?
Yes, I do.
Where you at, Mike?
Packet page 34. And 35.
Can't see that.
So before he jumps into that, just to be clear, so again, Mr. Levi had questioned, I think, the original analysis that was done. We tried to go back and address that with the revised analysis. So you've seen an earlier version of this. I think Mr. Kunkel, again, basically taking into account the questions that were raised by Mr. Levi. That's the reason we're looking at this document one more time.
All right. So my first question is, this is a repayment schedule on page 34 of the net revenues minus the leak adjustment as to what we would be reimbursing Rockwell at the top, correct?
That's correct. Just so I'm clear, you're looking at page 2 and 3 of my analysis?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so my first question is, when it's labeled as gross revenues down here at the bottom, or not the bottom, second line down, that's not actually the gross revenues for the line, that's the gross revenues that the repayment is based off of. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so the gross revenues from the line are actually much higher than that, correct?
Well, okay, the numbers that are in the upper portion that are shown throughout the payback year are gross revenues less the leak adjustment.
Yes, so those are net revenues, but only for the repayment not for the total gross revenue that the line will be grossing, just what we're required to pay to Rockwell, correct?
That's correct, but I
So
did.
for instance, and let me just get there, in the first year that one of the payments drops off, 2027, it's not that that CTUB is not still billing for that 41,000 and we're not still receiving that 41,000. It's just that that 41,000 is no longer obligated to go to Rockwell because it's been the 5 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
If you look at the payback related to, for instance, 2021, you'll see that runs for a 5-year period.
Yep.
2022 through 2026. Starting in 2027, that revenue does not go away. It will be revenue of the utility board.
And so why then, I guess I'll get to my first question, why then, when we look at the net unrecovered Rockwell reimbursement of 1.7, it's kind of the main figure you got to at the end, where on packet page 35, the next page, where you kind of make your conclusions about that analysis.
Yes.
I apologize because I'm going to be flipping back and forth between the two. So that 1.7 million that's not recovered, that doesn't include any of the additional gross revenues that we received.
It does. I backed those out after the 5-year reimbursement period ends.
Where are those backed out? You have the approximate cost of extension is $10 million. You have the CTUB share of costs is $442,000. That leaves 9.5 for Rockwell. Then you have Rockwell's reimbursement of 5.9. That leaves 3.6. You say the unfunded CTUB cost is $2 million, and the net unrecovered Rockwell reimbursement is 1.7. And the 1.9, the unfunded CTUB cost of service, matches up perfectly to the total unfunded cost of service on the previous page, which was arrived by calculating just the net revenues, not the gross revenue. Because if you add in all those missing blank spots at the top for the revenues that we still receive all those revenues that are listed there in all those blank spots. Those equal $2.2 million. So it's $2.2 million more dollars than what is shown here of the 4.7. That's not the gross revenue. That's the gross revenue that we have to pay back to Rockwell.
In my analysis, when revenues are freed up, they are, I believe, in the calculation. I could go back and review the details and.
I think we should do it right now. I mean, this is not, it's not an accurate depiction. And so if we take that $2.2 million in gross revenue, we times that by your 61% operation and maintenance, we get about 1.3 million. So we got to take 1.3 million off to get to our net revenue. That leaves $860,000. So really, the net unrecovered Rockwell reimbursement is not 1.7. It's about $875,000 that we've lost in the 11-year repayment. And what I'd like to do is after this meeting, I'll contact you, and I hope we could sit down and we can go over this together and provide a more accurate depiction of the costs. Because where I want to get to is that if we go the state funding route, Mr. Kunkel, for what you say, 23 years and 3 months.
Sir, if I could just go back to your question. If you look at the line item, less released revenues.
Yep.
Those are the released, you can see in year 2027 that released revenues are $45,040.69.
Yep.
You can see, if you look at the progression on year 2021, that's the first year that revenues would be released from the reimbursement, and you can see that it's netted off.
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
It'd be the 434, 422.16 if we're looking at year 2027. Okay, we take the leak adjustment off because the utility board would be keeping that. $62,142.01, and you take off the released revenues of $45,482.48 to come down to the operating deficit to the utility board.
Then how are you coming up with the total unfunded cost of service of $1.9 million? Two more lines down. How are you coming up with the total unfunded cost of total $1.9 million? What's the equation to figure that number out?
Okay, what that represents is just the progression of years in the payback year, and also the progression of years that debt service would be required on the utility board's share, that $35,040.24.
Yes.
But you can see, if you look at that less released revenues line item, you can see how that increases substantially during the later years.
Yes, but this continues on past that, not just year 11. We still make all those revenues past year 11.
I agree with you. What I was trying to show was what the negative impact to the utility board would be during the payback years. After the year 2031, it turns. You can see that it actually turns in year 2030, that instead of a deficit, there is a surplus of $82,307.97.
Where are you pointing to? Okay.
So it's going to flip, but what I wanted to show was what the unfunded impact to the utility board would be during these periods, and as far as what is not included in current rates. At 2020, it begins to flip.
Okay. So would you...
Or I'm sorry, 2030. 2030, it begins to flip. And that's because of the released revenues.
And so past year 11, and it was a little confusing to me, so if you could clear this up. Past year 11, we're no longer making payments to Rockwell, or up until year 13, we're making payments to Rockwell?
Then the utility board is going to get the revenues, and they 61% of it will go to O&M, and
okay.
Probably the other portion will be available for additional debt service.
Do you know the number, the approximate profit per year? Once it's built out, once you have all these lines on there, all these projects, Harvest Hills and all that are put in here, do you know what the actual total gross revenues would be at that point?
Well, I used the years in the analysis because that is what's called for under Rule 5.5.
No, but I'm saying, what would be the gross revenue of the line when we're done paying for it? Or when we're done reimbursing Rockwell, based on these numbers? I got like 1.2 million or 1.3. Does that sound about right?
I'd prefer doing a calculation of that, just so I don't misstate. But I could certainly calculate that for you.
Well, the reason I asked is because if the operating cost is 61%, and once we're done repaying Rockwell, all these numbers add up to 1.27 million, okay? That's our total gross revenue times 61%, cut that out, we get about $500,000 profit a year. And so in this calculation, we are out about $1.7 million, you say, after the 10-year repayment cycle to Rockwool. But if we do it the state's version and we pay it off over 23 years and 3 months, we get $0 after that, right? We've only been basically paying them off the entire thing.
Well,
We don't have any net profit if we do the state's funding, right?
You get 61% of the revenues every year.
How do we get 61% of the revenues? If
The O&M, the utility board retains that.
But I guess I don't see that in the agreement, that we get 61% past that.
I believe that's will be in the lease agreement.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, that is clearly detailed in the lease agreement, and that O&M calculation is evaluated every year, so if that changes, let's just say it, the cost of operation and maintenance increases, decreases, it's evaluated every year, and that calculation.
But the lease agreement is between us and the building commission.
That's correct.
And the letter that the state gave us, it just said net revenue, just like the PSC says net revenue.
And that is gross revenues less 61% for O&M costs.
So they calculate it differently than the PSC.
No, what I'm saying is that for every dollar of revenues, the utility board will keep 61 cents for O&M, and 39 cents will go to the state to repay the bond issue. Just as a comparison, under 5.5, what is required to be reimbursed is the customer's gross revenues less the leak adjustment.
Okay.
The leak adjustment is about 8%, and that 8% compares to 61% under the bond issue.
So we don't then know what the actual revenue on the line is going to be once, in this portion, it's paid off after 10 years. We have no idea?
Oh, it'll keep growing, sir, I'm sure.
And about $500,000 a year, right?
I can't project how.
Well, I'm just saying, if you just add up all the different numbers here, you get $500,000 of profit a year.
How that carries on
only grow,
after
it
the
wouldn't
reimbursement
decrease.
period, I'm not sure. The scope of the analysis was to take it through 5.5.
I guess, and let me back up and then I'll stop being a dead horse. After this repayment period to Rockwool, we owe them nothing else, correct?
That's correct.
And we retain the profit that we make on the line, correct?
Well, just a point of clarification, it's not profit. So it is the cost of running the utility
I understand.
outside of the O&M costs.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm saying, the profit. I'm not talking about the gross. I'm talking about gross minus O&M, minus the 61%.
Okay, yes, but not profit. It's
Okay. In a traditional business, it would be the same as profit, correct? Revenue minus cost.
And it would
Okay.
be, it would be.
Here, we would pass it on to our ratepayer, correct? We would hopefully adjust the rates to pass that profit on to the ratepayer, correct?
Well,
I don't think you want to make that statement 10 years out.
It's like the utility board has 3 projects that we've talked about before. The Ransom Project, Flowing Springs, and the Charlestown Project. What generally happens would be that after the 61%, whatever surplus there is would go towards debt service on a new project.
Yeah, we go into the general budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in any other business, they would call it profit that's then put back into the budget for something else. And I understand that a public utility is different than that. However, my point is, if it's making $500,000 a year plus another 13 years, that is actual money that we're recouping from the line. And we've already reimbursed Rockwool the the max amount that we had to after 10 years. Whereas with the state, we're not net zero until 23 years. We can't have additional monies coming in until after 23 years. We have to pay them.
I understand that. The bond issue as it is designed right now certainly requires lease payments in excess of what 5.5 does for reimbursements. I mean, I believe it's 30 years, and you can see that the payback period is for 5.5 is 10 years, but each year you can divide up into 5 segments.
I understand that.
So let me interject something if I could. So under the 5.5, though, we would have to come up with money. The utility would have to come up with some upfront money, right? Until we've paid off the utility.
Yes, that the utility would have to finance the utility share of the project, which is about $500,000, and somebody would have to pay this 42 cents per thousand, which all customers would end up paying it, because that 42 cents right now is not built into the rates.
Seems like in the long run, it may be more fiscally advantageous, but in the short run, first 10 years, rates are going to go up.
But that's done all the time with various bond issues, and that they call it leveling, that you see where one issue matures, and you use that to fund an additional bond issue for an additional project. So what I'm saying, more likely than not, that those future revenues will go right back into the system, and probably some type of upgrade project or something of that nature to pay the debt service on that.
But those are revenues that we would not have if we went with the state's financing, because we would just be netting out the O&M for the line and releasing the rest of the state for 23 years and 3 months, correct?
Well, that revenue is going to be free after 30 years. You're going to
after 30 years.
That's right.
Whereas with the 5.5 with Rockwell, it's free after 10 years.
You're correct on that.
It's just something to think about to my city council members, that after 10 years, we don't owe any more money if Rockwell pays for the line on the 5.5.
Correct, but in year 2026, we have to raise the rate by 72 cents.
How do you get 72 cents?
Right, bottom line. Because the 42 cents is an average over the entire 11 years.
Okay.
I believe it's approximate cost, it says 72 cents, or 20 cents, or 14 cents. I mean, yeah, we would have more money long time down the road, but today we wouldn't.
And
but
I guess
just to give you
we do need to go back to the state and say, listen, I don't know if this 30 years is right. Maybe we need to go back to them.
That's a negotiating point.
Yeah, we can negotiate.
But it could also be a negotiating point with Rockwell.
Yeah, but I'm saying, we can say,
well, Rule 5.5 is the PSC. I mean, that's a...
Yeah, certainly. If we went the alternate mainline extension agreement,
right.
It could be a negotiation.
I'll say we could go back to the state and say, listen, the terms are...
But one thing that council would ask, I think we talked about previously in regard to this freed up money, is that we took a rough look at Flowing Springs, Ranson, and the Charlestown project, because of course the desire is to do as much as you can under the current rate structure without increasing it. And I think that if including all three, we were coming down to barely meeting coverage or right at the minimum. During the payback years, under 5.5, it is going to constrain that. And could require a higher rate adjustment, project-related rate adjustment.
Excuse me, John. You said coming down to the minimum. Were you talking about 115%?
Yes.
Okay, so that 115% is what? $150,000? What is it, that 115% that we have to maintain, which is basically a reserve?
No, it's not a reserve, but and
It's
it's not a set amount, but it's your total debt service payments, or I'm sorry, your total cash available for debt service divided by your debt service payments on bond issues, and that ratio has to be maintained at 115% in accordance with your bond ordinances.
And we have to effectively keep that. Do you know what that rate is, or what that amount is now?
Yes, if you don't mind if I get another file from my...
Sure. Kristen, while Mike's taking a rest, could I ask you 2 more questions?
God
John,
forbid
excuse
we
me.
have a moment of silence or something.
I was looking at your map again, and just to be clear, you had said that regardless, if this line were to go in and the state were to pay for it, right now there would only be effectively 3 customers. It would be Rockwool on it, phase 1, I guess, and phase 2. And then there would be the Burr Park. And then there would be Shenandoah Junction, which I assume is the school.
No, Shenandoah Junction is a development that has a package plant currently that has been, that was incorporated into the design, assuming that they would connect eventually. I would, if it's okay, I will highlight the customers that could be connected to the line immediately. I didn't differentiate between those, but it's certainly more than 3 customers.
But
Burr Park wouldn't be paying, would they? If it was the...
I think he's just asking about direct connections to the line, or how much, if you want to look at the flow, I can highlight those in the calculations that we've done.
Well, where I'm getting at is that even, I know those kids out in I went to Jefferson High. I know we use the bathroom a lot, but you add up Rockwool, you add up the Burr Park, and it comes to less than, I got about 88,000 gallons a day. We're building a capacity for 908,000 gallons per day?
Correct.
Correct, okay.
But to clarify, I would have to identify the immediate connections for you I'm without going through and evaluating all of the existing customers, I don't know the exact number of what would connect immediately.
Okay, appreciate that. So the capacity that we'd immediately be putting into that line is less than 100,000 gallons per day, but we're building a system that's...
I will have to run the calculations for you to
900,000.
determine what would connect to, immediately on day 1.
That would be great. The other question is, right across the road from Rockwell, of course, is North Jefferson, which I assume we're hooking up.
No.
And then right behind North Jefferson is Fox Glen with, 250 sewer septic systems. Are we hooking those up?
Those are not being hooked up. There is a connection to serve those in the future, but those, Fox Glen is currently on a private system, so we have provided the provision if at some point the developer or HOA would want to connect those, they could, but we are not including that with this design.
Okay. And then the Miller property, which is north of the Rockwool property, is that part of the Jefferson Orchard site?
Not that I'm aware of, but what we did with the calculations and the sewer design is looked at the Jefferson County Comprehensive Plan, the Charlestown Sewer Strategic Plan, Ranson's development projections, and that is the basis of these properties being defined as future development within the northern region.
Okay, so we're not, this is not an imminent issue where we need sewer at those locations, because many of them have not even been built out and have, I assume, been planned over many years and have not still been built out.
Right, we're providing the main infrastructure line that those developments, future developments, could connect to.
Okay, thank you.
I took a look at the consolidated utility as of June 30th of 2018 and factored in the 2018 A and B bond issues, and I did not factor in any other savings, which is probably an element of it, but the coverage was 136%.
And that comes to roughly what in terms of money?
If I could get
Well, well no, I mean, just an estimate would be.
Told you it was going to be a boring conversation.
It'd be about, that in dollars would be roughly $760,000 over the minimum.
700 over the minimum?
Yes.
Okay, and then the minimum is 1.15.
1.5.
1.5, okay. Okay, and then I had another question, but it just, so you said we have a 130% rate that we're maintaining now?
In my analysis, I determined it was 136%, but that's a rough estimate.
Is that your plan? Sorry, I have not been as detailed in reading as Councilmember Brittingham, but is that 130% built into these numbers, that we would maintain that 130% as opposed to 115%?
No, there is, I think a certain amount of that would be factored into equalization between the PSD rates and the Ranson rates. That certainly is factored into providing for the Flowing Springs project, the Ransom project, and further out, the Charlestown project. So the funds are earmarked.
Could I ask what Charlestown project? Is that one of the projects that's in our 2018 strategic plan?
I believe it is.
Yes, it's the renewal and replacement project that is defined in the 2018 sewer strategic plan.
That doesn't start until what, 2023?
We are moving forward into preliminary engineering. We'll be discussing that at the utility board meeting tomorrow. So hopefully we'll have that wrapped up by summer of this year, and we'll start understanding the costs associated with that. We're intending to have that built in 2020, 2021.
I'm a little confused, though, because you had said twice that you haven't done a lot of the preliminary work for the Flowing Springs project.
They're two separate projects.
Right, but you haven't done a lot of the analysis for the Flowing Springs project.
We don't know what the scope is yet.
Yeah.
We need to find out what the scope is. Yeah.
But the rates, I'm concerned about how you're calculating the rates based on these projects all being added together, Flowing Springs, the consolidation, and the Route 9 project, and you're making projections on projects that have not been developed.
Yes, very, very rough estimates, very high level at this point.
So this is, John, a rough estimate.
Oh, it's a very rough estimate. It's based on estimate after estimate.
Yes, for future projections, growth projections.
These build-outs are based on that, I believe, engineering study that are they going to be achieved? Well, nobody knows what the economy is going to be like.
We could, if we had a boom, the repayment would happen much sooner than.
And then you're also basing it on this document that you gave us a month ago with assumptions that we haven't agreed on that says future project costs are equally shared by all customers. So you're also basing it on these assumptions that we have not made decisions on.
But this analysis is totally separate from the discussions. What we're talking about is the state financing option and the revenue repayment structure, as well as the Rule 5.5 analysis, which is, based on just the Route 9 sewer project.
And potential impact to all ratepayers.
Correct.
Assuming all ratepayers
Correct.
take an equal burden, not just PSD or Route 9 area.
Right. Well, I was just trying to get to the bottom of that 42 cents per 1,000 gallons assertion that you made
I'm
first
sorry.
thing.
What
I was just trying to get to the bottom of where this 42 cents per 1,000 gallon.
the impact that has on the equalization is that 42 cents was never built into a cost of service study to develop rates. So it's really an unfunded cost of service, the 42 cents per thousand. And what it does, I am not saying that the utility board could not afford to subsidize this project under 5.5. What I am saying is that it puts more pressure on equalization, puts more pressure on projects to get them built with the lowest rate increase possible. It's going in the opposite direction of what equalization would be going.
Well, if you do sit down with Mike, I hope I can get an invite to that. I'd like to.
It's fun to crunch the numbers.
But to go back, Mr. Brittingham, to your question on freed up revenues, if you look at page 2 of 3, okay, you'll see, for instance, like the year 2021 reimbursement period is over 5 years, and then that annual amount gets freed up the next year. So you can simply add that initially in 2017 and then add to that the subsequent years.
Say that again? If I go to 2021, new EDUs per year, 2021.
You'll see that it's being reimbursed at a rate of 482, 48 per year.
Yep.
Okay, so 2027, that's free revenue to the utility board, not subject to reimbursement. And then in
that's what I'm saying. It doesn't really say that on here anywhere.
Yeah, the next year, well, it's in that line item, less released revenues. That's how that line item was developed.
Then where does that go? That one, so like the operations and maintenance expense deficit, where does that get plugged in? Is that operation and maintenance expense deficit plus debt service equals total unfunded cost of service?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it includes the revenues that have been released under the 5.5 methodology.
Okay. So to go back to it then, after the 11-year period, we have then a deficit of 1.7 for the line, correct? Your bottom figure, your net unrecovered Rockwell reimbursement.
It's on the next page.
Page 35.
He's 2 or 3. That's 2 or 3.
I'm sorry, they're just both kind of connected. It's tough to talk about one without the other.
1.7 million you're talking about.
Yeah, 1.735.
It's on your 2 of 3 page, I believe.
Or it's 1 of 3, actually.
Oh, 3
Well,
of 3, yeah.
okay, the O&M deficit is 1.537 million, and to that you'd add the required debt service on the utility share, and that's what totals the $1,923,000.
Yeah, I'm saying the total over the course of the entire project, where you have the summary, and it's on page 1 of 3 of yours. It's net unrecovered Rockwell reimbursement, bottom left figure.
Here.
The total amount that we're supposed to lose in the deal, if it's done on this analysis.
Would be the
1.7.
No, the 1.9. Is that what you're referring to? The unfunded
Net
CTUP cost?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. 1.923. What I'm saying is after year 11, basically then we're trying to make up that 1.923 after that, correct?
That's correct. As the years progress, more revenues will be released.
Okay, and even if we don't add any more people after this last one that we hope to add, even if we don't add any more customers after that, it's about $500,000 a year additional revenues. So it'd take 4 years to pay off the 1.9, and we'd be at 0. And now we're up to year 15, and we're at 0. Whereas with the state financing, it's 23 years, 3 months to get to 0.
Well, the other consideration, though, is the impact to other projects that the utility board wants to accomplish under 5.5. So there is an impact with regard to the debt service ratio and funding of these other projects that we need to get done. So I think that certainly that would be a benefit of the state financing option. It would not negatively impact the ratepayers, nor would it impact other projects that we need to accomplish.
Correct. We wouldn't be taking out more loans
And
in our bond issue.
Right.
Bond rate.
further discussion on this?
I got my page back.
Real quick, as far as negotiating, this might be for Mr. George, or as far as negotiating, who handles that? How does that work? How does that mechanism work?
Well,
That, if it would be a council vote on the lease agreement and the terms, that would need to be discussed with the building commission, and, the utility board could certainly bring up the issue with the state, if you would want to give that direction, or council and the building commission could propose an amendment to the 30-year term.
Gee, that sounds like fun. That's some moving parts.
Well, it was a moving part. So in the initial discussions with the state on the lease agreement, they came back and took the commitment term from 20 years to 40 years.
I was going to say, didn't we just do the opposite of that? I mean, isn't that part of the irony here now? Now we're saying we only want to pay after 20 years when initially we were not happy with the letter because it said 20 years when we were told the term was 30 years?
It said 40 years.
It said 40 years.
Yes.
We took it
40
down to
was in
30.
the initial.
Thank you for remembering that, because I was sitting here thinking.
Correct.
We actually
So
wanted
then
it 20
we-
years, but they came back with 30.
We had, discussed 30 years, but then certainly after your comment, we did the exact calculations based on the difference from the original commitment letter, and that ended up to be about 23 point.
Okay. Understood.
23 years, 8 months.
So you did the negotiating then, the Charlestown Utility Board did the negotiating with the state on that one?
So,
Service bond
staff
counsel.
worked with our legal counsel and bond counsel to create draft the lease agreement. It was sent to the state, back and forth with comments, and we ended up with the 30-year term.
And the 23 years, 3 months, though, that's only if we were paying $450,000 every year, correct?
No, what that basically, it's just a direct comparison of the original commitment, which was $9 million at 20 years. If you look at a $10.5 million project, it ends up being the equivalent term would be 23 years, 3 months.
Yeah, 10 and a half at $450,000 is 23 years, 3 months, right?
So could we do analysis on this state funding these numbers? Is there possible with the projected income, the 61%? Yeah. I haven't.
Determined that the 10.5 million would be paid off in less than I forget the exact, but it was
I
a
can't remember.
20-year, it was under the 20-year period.
If everything went,
If
how
everything
everything
was
went,
per plan. So
right.
that's obviously, that was a
Paid it off in
condition.
20 years, not 20.
But you can pay the bond off early, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, let's just
They
say
would love that.
the economy booms and everybody's ready to connect, we could have it
Yeah, but
paid off in 10 years. I mean, it's
but
based on growth projections.
keep in mind, none of these customers have actually applied for service on this line, only Rockwell. I mean, as Mike pointed out,
That's not necessarily
that's not
true.
true.
well, the
because
majority of them
yes,
are vacant, large developments that are in that analysis,
Have asked for sewer. They have asked for sewer connection.
but currently are vacant, large developments.
But if I
Shenandoah Junction has roughly 200 units.
No, I
that would
understand,
be
but
a
I
direct
mean-
connection.
If I remember correctly, during the PSD consolidation, you brought to this council several spreadsheets that show that there had been requests for the EDS things that had been going on for 20-plus years, I think, in some cases, that had not been met. So we're building, I kind of go back to your map, we're building a $10.5 million sewer line to service, from what I'm adding up, less than a tenth of the folks that may actually exist, and 90% of this line is excess capacity that, as he pointed out, no one's hooked up to.
Other than Rockwell's.
Well, like I said, please let me do the calculations for you. Right off the top of my head, I think that the industrial park with their 3 lift stations is roughly in the order of magnitude of 300,000 gallons per day. So, the capacity there for those. I'll get you the calculations if you'd like to see those of the
Would.
existing.
And then I'd also like to see, for all of these that you have in yellow, how long those permits have been with the PSD? Or when did they make the original requests for the EDS units?
Can I ask you, Mike, where you're going with this? Is it that your thought process is that we're building too big a line, that we're not going to need this capacity in the future? I'm not sure I'm following where you're going with this.
I think that's right. And then I'm also concerned that right next to these large users, potential users, are folks that potentially need that service that will not be getting any. I know the issue's there, but
I'd like to point out, okay, one of the reasons that we have Charlestown City developments that were being serviced by the PSD and the rates, and we went through consolidation, is because we had capacity issues. So when you look at expanded capacity as something in a negative tone, I have a little trouble getting there, because when we're in a position where a developer has to put in its own system or hook up to PSD, pay for its pump stations, the rate equalization we went through for Hunt Field, all 100% due to not having a capacity for development when it was ready to come online. So just putting out an alternative dialogue there
it's
for you.
fair. But right now we're building a line that will be used by 10%.
Let's let Kristen do the numbers before we jump to that conclusion, and then we can have
It's
that.
in their math.
I think one other factor to consider is what's the difference of cost between building a line that's maybe 10% greater than the capacity or this particular line, whatever percentage is.
Well,
And then it's a cost-benefit analysis is what we're talking about.
True, and hopefully you will all remember that when the original proposal came, it was about a $6 million project. The utility board, looking globally at the capacity issues in the region, fought for these improvements to be funded by the state. We felt strongly that, these are not pie-in-the-sky developments. These are what we feel are realistic growth projections that will service the northern region and a little bit of the eastern region for the next 30 years. Why not take advantage of that?
But
Thankfully, the state has been working with us to achieve that.
But I would like to see when did these developments apply for their EDS? I mean, how long have these EDS units been requested?
I'm sorry.
Or what's the
EDUs.
capacity? EDUs, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so to recap. Now,
I just, one last point, because I think one of the council members brought it up. The growth projections, new customers in the 5.5 calculation mirror what was shown in the bond calculation. They're the same growth projections in both.
Say that again.
The new customers and the new customer flow between the projection that was made for the bond issue and the calculation of 5.5 are the same.
Okay.
So as I was going to say, this whole topic, again, is about preparing to schedule a vote for the lease agreement. I mean,
So
that's
easy to get
that's the
sidetracked.
subject matter. Let's not forget that. Right. So, again, we tried to address the questions that we thought we had at the last meeting. What I've jotted down here is Kristen is committed to identifying the immediate hookups and the flows. I think we want to know that. There still is the question of the West Virginia DEP permit modification, which we think we won't know until mid-February-ish. We don't have the form of the loan agreement yet, which has been asked for. But again, Mr. Stump is working on that. Hopefully we'll have something by February 4th. And at least there's been some discussion about the term, whether we're comfortable with the 30-year term, or whether council wants us to push back as staff, a little bit harder on that to get that down to whether it's 20 years or 23 years or something like that. So to me, those feel like the issues that are sort of still out there. My question is, do we feel like we're any closer to setting a date for the vote, or are we?
I don't think we're close enough to set a date. I think we're going to need probably another workshop on this. I'd like to follow along on Mr. Brittingham's question on some of these numbers and see where they go. So,
right, we did certainly get the request that Councilman Brittingham and Tolbert would like to at least have a conversation with Mr. Kunkel and the utility board regarding the data.
Well,
So
and I think the workshop could be important too, because we need to go over some of the questions that we've previously asked, or the concerns that we've previously had and still haven't gotten answers to. When we pulled it seems people just forget about some of the things that don't make sense or don't add up. We asked Rockwell for their sewer bills from Byhalia, and it ended up being 200 to 400% higher than what they're telling us here. Their best answer was that they didn't see the transparency in their bills, and yet it's been 2 months since then, and we've had no follow-up with them. I mean,
But we did answer the question again that there's some limit on how much sewage they can put into the system, and that's driven by the permit modification.
no, there's how much industrial sewage. The question down in all those high usage numbers down in Byhalia were domestic use. They weren't industrial. And it was 200 to 400 times higher than these already high numbers that they gave us here. And still no answer from them. I can tell you what, if I was paying a $9,000 a month sewer bill, I'd figure out if it was 200 to 400% off.
Sure.
Additionally, they know that we made a big deal about it here. At least I did. I would assume if you're Rockwell, I would love to come back and laugh in Councilman Brittingham's face and go, ha, you were wrong. So I find it hard to believe that they haven't figured out the answer to that question or know the answer.
Well, to address that issue, that is why we requested a flow meter on the domestic flows. The sewer availability letter was drafted for the domestic use that they had provided us. So in the event that they exceed what they had provided in their application, they will pay for that. They will pay for any increase in capacity if it exceeds what's going into the line.
Could we get the actual building plans, the plumbing schematics from them? I mean, isn't that,
I would assume you could request that.
can CTUB get that for us?
So-
I mean, I've only seen portions. I don't have them. I mean,
The reason I ask is because
council could request
Would that have been part of the building permit request then with Ranson? Is that the place? Okay.
Yes.
So I will follow up and see if we can get a copy of that document.
So what questions need to be answered for this, to setting a date?
Probably, well, the permit modification would be kind of handy. Do we know when?
Well, and one of the things that we had covered in the summary was that, again, getting back to the permit modification being issued, if it's not issued, then the funding is not available, nor would sewer availability be available.
So that's not even a question that
Yes,
we're waiting
yeah.
for. I mean, in theory, so
Ron?
what other questions do we need answered? I mean, I'm asking.
I agree. I felt like at the last meeting, we were trying to get down to the final questions that we wanted answered. I think most of them got addressed tonight that we asked.
Well, I would say-
It opened up one new issue with regard to the developments that are going to be served the customers immediately online. You can get that to us. I guess the question is, what else? If there is a desire to go towards a shorter-term loan, it would be good to be able to tell them that, to pursue that tonight.
I think it'd be good. I think we obviously at least need the financing agreement. We still have yet to see that. Been asking for that for
Of
months.
course, that's here. That's on the list. So it's identifying the hookup and flow issues, the loan agreement, and some clarity on the permit, which again, I think we're all saying is out of our control in the sense of either it's going to be issued or it's not going to be issued. And we know that's going to happen within the next month. And then I think this other unsettled question of whether we'd like to look at pursuit of an even lower term than 30 would have been nicer to have this discussion when we were at 40 and moved down to 30. But whether we want to have some projections associated with fewer years.
Well,
I don't know that I'd feel prepared to say necessarily, I don't think it hurts to see.
I mean, based on your quick analysis, I would like to see if we can negotiate a shorter term. And I think reasonably would be 25. I'm just going to throw out the 25 years because that's, yeah, plus it's a little bit higher than, so I think that's a reasonable expectation. But again, even the term really doesn't impact whether or not we vote for this thing.
Correct.
Or how the sewer is going to be put in or anything. The only thing that would impact it is if the customer says, I'm not going to build here, right? I mean, realistically speaking.
Yep.
Right, and then everything's contingent on the permit anyway, so if there's no permit, there's no financing.
Right.
I mean, just looking at the calendar, is February 19th, is that plausible to have all our ducks in a row? Is that enough time?
I guess my thought process was the first meeting in March, only because of the DEP could be resolved by then, the permit issue could be resolved by then. I feel like, yeah, I mean, that was my thought process. I mean, I don't know that these can be answered by February 19th, but I also don't want to wait for something else to come up. I mean, we got a couple more issues here tonight. If we schedule for March, then builds in a little bit of leeway just in case.
I agree with Ann. I think that gives us some time, and it gives us time to go over the information.
I mean, I don't know that we leave it on the agenda as a vote schedule, but maybe we leave it on the agenda as an item for follow-up to questions that are pending, as opposed to a vote, and go ahead and schedule the vote for first meeting in March.
I think it's time to kind of move off dead center one way or the other on this. And what concerns me, which is what you're saying, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. What concerns me is this loan that's accruing interest every month. And you don't want to jump into anything, that's for sure, and we got to get in all this information. But if we're just kind of spinning our wheels, waiting for a more opportune time, I don't know. And I'm not saying we have been. I'm not saying we're going to be. But I think when you get to the point where we've beat the horse, there's no more beating the horse, then we have to make a decision one way or the other.
Yeah, I think the first meeting in March would be the time to make the decision one way or the other. But at least for me, there's still quite a few things I want to review, and as I know when we get things in, I do want to take considerable time reviewing those documents. So for me, first meeting in March would sound good.
I don't want to go pretty much further than that because we have budget that we have to start working on.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be our first budget workshop too, so that's going to be a doozy.
So one thing to keep in mind, if we do change the venue for the meeting, if we wanted to make it CW Hall, we talked about that, maybe is the day to make sure everybody in the community who has an interest. It will require a vote of City Council to move the meeting to a different location. So we'll still have time to do that, but I'd certainly be interested in members' thoughts on whether or not they'd want to move to a bigger location for the meeting, for the vote itself. So again, we don't have to decide that tonight, but
let's bring that up for the next meeting.
Okay.
So at this point, someone wants to make a motion to set the date for the vote, first meeting in March?
Is it going to include the negotiation for the term as well?
Yes.
We'll direct staff to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I move that we schedule the vote for the 4 March meeting. I think that's the first meeting in March.
I think you're right.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
All right.
And thank you, Kristen. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. All right, we're moving on to city statement, our proposed Rockwell facility.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, in light of all this, I move that we table 3166. If seconded, I'd like an opportunity to explain.
I'll second that.
3166.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, if you'd like to.
I guess my concern is I'm not quite sure to what benefit a statement will do for us, the citizens of Charlestown, the ratepayers, or citizens of the region. Will a statement like this stop the plan from being built? Correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, that answer is no. This issue has divided our community. Will this statement help bring us back together? Again, my answer is no. I don't think it will. Will this statement stop all the vitriol surrounding this issue? No, I don't think it will. In fact, I think it probably will make it worse. Will this statement relieve the immense pressure brought to us by the state of West Virginia as far as this project goes? I don't think it will. Will this statement undo the zoning changes that allowed this to happen in the first place? I don't think it will. We'll be asked to decide the feasibility of the sewer project. I don't want this project to be viewed as a referendum on any corporation, just as I don't want this statement to cloud our judgment or influence our decision on the sewer project. I don't want to create a sense of false hope or anything like that. Those are my concerns about of these letters at this time.
Appreciate your thoughts. I don't think it creates false hope. I don't think it'll do any more to increase divisions. I think what it does is that it lets our community know where we stand on this very important issue. I, for one, think this whole Rockwell thing is immoral. I think building a factory next to an elementary school is about the most immoral thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. I think this whole project has lacked transparency, accountability, and it really borders on something that no people should ever have to go through. People never had a choice. This was just foisted in our lap. I still don't have all the information on this project, Shuttle, and how it came here, and where it's going, and what's going. And I think Rockwell will fundamentally damage our local economy for a generation to come. I think it's going to decimate home values in the region around where it's being built. And I, for one, think we should go on the record and say that we don't want something that's going to be located next to Charlestown that's going to fundamentally damage our economy, fundamentally damage our way of life, and fundamentally damage the lives of people throughout this county. I mean, the one thing is, while my son doesn't go to that elementary school, people I know's children do. Those are our children. We have a responsibility to those children, and we shouldn't leave them hanging. And by making this statement, people at least know where we stand. And we got to stand with what is moral and what is right. And those are my thoughts.
Can I? All right, so I just want to make sure procedurally we do this right. There's a motion to table. I don't think we have a second. We do have a second, I'm sorry. A motion to table is not debatable, so we need to vote first on whether or not to debate or to table the motion. If we do, obviously it's tabled. If we don't, then we'll go back to the original. So
appreciate our parliamentarian. All right, so all in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
No.
All right, 4-4.
I break the tie?
Okay.
All right. So we have two items for consideration. One I worked on with Councilman Brittingham and Councilman Tolbert. There's another one. That's a form of a statement. The other one is in the form of a resolution, which Ann worked on, which I think is actually quite good as well. Again, personally, whether we do a statement or a resolution, I don't really have a particular choice, but I actually wouldn't mind moving forward with the resolution that Ann proposed. I personally think that it makes the statement, it makes it succinctly, and really at this point I don't have anything to add to it.
I helped, as you just said, I helped you work on the original one. However, I also like Ann's resolution better, and I don't have too much to add to it.
Mm-hmm.
Good, then I'll make a motion to approve the resolution as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yeah.
Although this is clearly one of the best resolutions I've ever read.
However,
I would say on the now therefore be resolved, the City of Charlestown Council believes that Rockwell facility should have been located. I would say should be located in an
Yes.
area rather than have been.
I like those edits.
All right, so
And I also I just wanted to make another point to your point, which is a good point, by the way, is this does not stop the plant from being constructed. And all those issues that you pointed out to, I think that many people on this city council would probably agree with the majority of those. But just to be clear, this is a resolution that says where we stand, but it's not necessarily has any impact on whether or not Rockwell builds or doesn't.
yeah, that's 100%, you're 100% correct, Bob. And if the vote comes up, city council members, that certainly doesn't bind you in how you vote. You'll vote certainly your conscience and what you feel the law is regarding.
Well, does it relieve us of our responsibility?
Certainly, you're very correct. It's a statement of values, I would say. All right, so do we have a motion to make the amendment Bob suggested?
I
So
will
moved.
accept that change.
Second. Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Yeah.
Hearing none. On the amendment, all in favor?
I think Councilman Tolbert
Time
saying
out.
yes.
Another
Time out.
amendment?
Go ahead. It
No,
looked like
you
you
were
wanted to
going
throw time out there, that's all. Go ahead.
No. And Nick, you do make a couple of good points. But I will point out that on November 19th, 2018, we passed 11 guidance points for our Jefferson County Development Authority. And all of these points, or resolution option number 2, Ann's resolution, basically captures this thing. And as you said, it does not, this is not a legal document. It is a statement of that. From a perspective of someone who is in line to become the JCDA representative, I think option 2, Ann's resolution, actually strengthens the council's November 19th guidance document because they then, both of them, focus on the one thing that we have been constantly saying is that comprehensive plans are important, and ours and the other municipalities do not have heavy industry built into those things. And it goes a long way, I think, when we have both a statement to our Jefferson County Development Authority guidance, and then we also make a statement that heavy industry is not envisioned in the Charlestown comprehensive plan. So I think, as many people in the audience will remember on Thursday night, that was a reoccurring question from one of the Jefferson County commissioners. Have you read the county's comprehensive plan? Do you know it? What is in it? And he was alluding to the fact that heavy industry is not built into that plan. And so comprehensive plans are important. And they were not used as guidance in this particular situation. And they should have been. So I will be voting for Ann's thing, and I think it's good, really good.
I just want to clarify, I'm not exactly thrilled that this body's put into this.
If I could remember,
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
we're talking about the amendment.
Oh, the
at this
amendment.
point.
There you go.
We haven't voted on the amendment, so let's make sure we're,
Amendment, right?
right, the amendment to change the
Bob's
language
amendment.
that Mr. Trainer suggested.
Sure, the motion is second, so let's vote on the amendment. All in favor of Bob's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries on the amendment.
So now back to discussion on the amended motion.
Got it. So, I mean, I feel like I've been dealt a 2-7 offsuit, and I have to make gold out of this, and that's not easy, to do. But I completely understand, everyone's feelings toward this and all that. It's just I just not 100% sure exactly what this will do to benefit us. So that's all.
And I agree
I
with,
don't see what the point is in this.
and I agree with the sentiment, but I think it's clear. You all have been coming to our meetings for a really long time. You don't have a lot of fans up here of what's going on here, but we are in the situation we're in. We're trying to do our best to get through every little bit of it. I think we have support for this resolution, so I think I'll just shut up and let the vote get called.
Just to say, the purpose of this resolution, in my mind, at least for me, is to show the community where we are. We've been talking about this now since August. It is the first time that we had the large turnout. We get dozens of people here every single meeting talking. Tonight was literally the first time that we've ever had anybody in opposition or in favor of this project show up to speak with us. It's obviously, I take offense when people call this a dividing topic. It's not a dividing topic. It's controversial, for sure, but it's not dividing. Dividing means that you kind of have two equal sides that disagree about something. In this scenario, whether the dozen people or so on the internet want to scream as loud as they can about it, it doesn't change the numbers. The numbers are that this is something like a 95-5 or a 90-10 issue, where the overwhelming majority of our community is against this thing, and we owe it to them. We can't just sit here day in, day out, every single day, and listen to these people come up here and speak and act like we have no position on this whatsoever. Obviously, we all have positions on it. And so this is a resolution to say what the position of the majority of the council of this town think. That's all it is.
Thank you, everyone. Any further discussion? I almost feel like we've exhausted this topic. All right, hearing none. All in favor, signify by aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
So we have 2 votes, Hines and Zaglifa voting no.
Okay. So,
Do you want to take a?
Nick, yeah, let's take, we're going to take a 5-10 minute recess and freshen up, and we'll go get back to business. All right, where are we? What are we?
I think. I'm not sure.
Okay, don't get all excited.
Well, apparently this, under our unfinished business, the second reading is not as popular as some of the things we have been talking about. All right, so let's get back into the regular order of our agenda. We're going back to 3158. Second reading, public hearing and consideration of an ordinance to approve the 2018 state law replacement pages to the codified codes of the city of Charlestown.
Move we approve second reading.
Well,
I think we
public
need
hearing.
to open
Oh,
public hearing.
Yeah.
Yes, I move that we open up public hearing.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is open. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Hearing none, can we get a motion to close the
Move to
public hearing?
close.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. All right.
Hey, Nick, do you want to make a motion?
No, I'm done.
I'll make a motion we approve the second hearing, or second reading.
Okay.
Second.
Yay.
All right, motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approves unanimously. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to 3159, legal counsel, representation for utility matters.
All right, so just a quick update from our last meeting. You had directed me to consider some options for providing legal counsel to the council or to the city council related to utility matters. So I did reach out to both Hoy, Shingleton. I just wanted to make sure that if he could give me some sense of some people that he felt like he could work with. I felt that we had to have a good working relationship with Hoy. And then I did also reach out to John Stump as well to see if he had any thoughts across the state. So what I've learned is I got 5 names of lawyers who work on utility matters across the state that might be good people to consider, that they think would probably not have a conflict with the Rockwell project as we know it, or any other matters in front of Charlestown at the moment. Having said that, I mean, I think it would be wise if we still want to go down this path. I think my recommendation would be that we would develop a request for qualifications. We certainly would push it out to these 5 individuals, but open it up to really anyone across the state who feels like they're in a position to provide utility assistance to the city. Identify an individual or a firm, come back to council then with a recommendation, and we can execute an agreement there. So again, the thought was that this would be a person who would be on standby to the council, that we could engage on utility matters as needed.
Now, would we do that like another bidding process? Like, would it be scored? I mean, similar to any other? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm proposing a request for qualifications process. So basically, yeah, we'd put out a proposal, we'd ask for people who are qualified, and then we would first, do some evaluation of whether or not we think that they're qualified to do the role. So we would score them in some ways there, and then enter into negotiations on the rate after that.
Well, I guess the one thing I would raise at this point is where are the funds in our budget to pay for this new legal services in addition to our existing? Because Hoy is paid by the utility board, our bond counsel is paid to the utility and bond. We're adding a service and a separate service from the legal service contract that we entered into. So I just throw that out there for something to think about. Doesn't mean we can't go through the RFP process, but I don't know what kind of dollar figure you put on it, or if you ask them to come up with some kind of a retainer for the services that we come up with, and we'll have to talk about it in the next budget cycle.
We're going to have to refer to finance, I believe.
Yeah, but I think we might get close to the new budget by the time we get through the RFP process. So.
I think it could probably be concurrent. I mean, the RFP process doesn't mean we're going to do it. I think finance could probably concurrently look at it.
I think we need to specify exactly what we want this service to provide us.
So maybe bring back an RFP?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think as a next step, I'll bring back the proposal. You'll outline what I think you're looking for, in a scope of work, and
do we have a number for what is it, September 4th? We voted to approve Steptoe & Johnson as this council's legal counsel. Okay. John Stump was part of that package that we accepted. We are now going and asking for, we would continue down the route of using Steptoe & Johnson for our normal legal questions and activities, but we would not select John to give us utility guidance. We are looking for an independent attorney to give us that guidance. My question is, after 20 minutes, has there been any money expended since September 4th for John Stump as part of that legal package?
Yeah, I don't have any bills that have money for Stump yet, but they're a little bit behind on their billing. So I'm not saying that there wouldn't be him, there might not be some hours in there for him. Another good point, though, that you raised, and I forgot to mention, is I did reach out to Mike Funk as well, because, again, he is serving as the primary contact for us, to let him know that we might be looking for a utility counsel separate from Steptoe & Johnson, just to as a courtesy to let them know that we wouldn't be looking for them to provide that kind of service. So they're fully aware of that, and they understand that, and will do whatever the city wants them to do. As far as our budget is concerned, we put about, I think it's $110,000 aside for legal counsel this year. Again, there was a break where we didn't have any legal counsel, but we certainly have had a lot of legal activity since then. they're behind on their billing, so I'm not exactly sure where we are with the budget at this point, so
But
it's a
that would
fair
be
question.
an interesting thing, because we're not going to spend and give Steptoe and Johnson for that specific legal service, we would then be effectively giving to or paying for another legal service. So it may
net
not
itself
balance out,
That's
of
right.
course, but it's
Yeah.
not as if there's a huge chunk of money that we have to, new money that we have to find. We're just not going to be giving that money for John Stump's portion of that Steptoe and Johnson.
And to be fair, or to be clear, we didn't enter into an amount with Steptoe and Johnson. They basically offered us an hourly rate. So we'll pay based on the hours that they charge us. So again, it's capped a little bit by what's in the budget, but there's not a retainer amount that's set aside each month for them.
So do I understand then that we're looking for an attorney to do the utility questions for us, and that we would not, I mean, I'm just paraphrasing what you say, we would not use Steptoe and Johnson for that service, correct?
That is my desire.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's my understanding of that's what you were looking for. So we're trying to find a council that can provide that kind of assistance.
Yes, but independently, I'm sure that the utility board is going to continue to engage Steptoe and Johnson
Absolutely.
for certain aspects of, as bond counsel. So
Absolutely.
He's still going to be before us. He won't
Right.
be our attorney.
Yes.
Fully understand that.
Okay.
I fully understand that. And I think he should, as long as they hire him, they have the contract with him. But I do not believe this council should have, we should be using the same utility attorney that our utility board uses.
Okay. All right, I'll come back with an RFQ for the council to review.
Sounds great. All right, so this is an easy one, 3164, community donations, 2019 allocations. As you see in your packet, as part of that process, city does ask the recipients to send a letter back noting what they've done with the donation, so that's in the packet for you to look over. Not sure if anyone has any questions, concerns on that.
I just have a comment on that. I'm glad that we finally got all the letters. Some of the organizations had to be prompted for, but I read through that. I think it's a good idea for us to have some accountability of what the money's used for. And I think this may not be perfect, but it's kind of getting there if you go through the different letters. So that's it. The Finance Committee recommended that we go with the allocations as budgeted.
Yeah, I think this is great, and even, I do a lot of work on grants and the grant process, and normally with the grant, you're going to do a mid-year report and then an end-of-year report, and some of them get a little bit more information on them. I think this is a good start, but it might be a process where we do want to have, here's a mid-year, with some of our grants, here's a mid-year report, what you did with the money, and here's an end-of-year report. Probably with the fire departments, we really don't need that.
And it took some prompting from city staff to do that, so kudos to them.
Standing job, staff.
Could I?
The only thing I would add is that we wrote a letter to all of them last year when we allocated it. I think we should do the same thing this year, and I think that we might want to personalize the letters to each of them. And there was some question about how much effort was put into some of the letters, reading through them. One of them is simply a fundraising letter that was sent back to us, the generic one that they send out to all. We were saying, here's $10,000. They were saying, here's our fundraising letter, telling you how we spend money. So I think we really should look at, who needs this money, who's appreciative of it, and how is it being spent.
And in saying that, however, the only public bathroom in Charlestown is the Charlestown Library. They deal with our homeless population. Community Ministries, we are the county seat. We tend to attract a large number of people to Charlestown. I know we've totaled this to be $50,000, but there's an opioid epidemic going on. Charlestown has a 10% poverty rate. is it not possible that we look at possibly increasing this and increasing our donations to these things on maybe a yearly basis based on something? You know,
I think it's a good topic for budget deliberations, which are coming up. I think as far as the fiscal year this year, we've got the 50,000. I think the organizations have met their requirements for their responsiveness and what they're doing with the funds. And again, these are very basic services. There was a time when we could do more, and we could, you know, do a lot more for a lot wider group of community services. So, but I'm pleased to be able to continue to support those that provide very basic services that we don't provide as a city. So I'll go ahead and move approval of the recommendation of the Finance Committee to fund the organizations listed at a total of $50,000.
And I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right, so we have 3155, Resolution, Jefferson County Emergency Operations Plan.
Move we approve the resolution as submitted.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion?
I apologize. I agree with this. I just had a couple basic questions. Is what do we contribute to that plan as far as resources, money, personnel, anything like that? What's our role in it?
Yeah, so I'm not particularly well versed on this because I didn't have any role in this myself. We don't provide any money, but Seth Rivard has been our contact or been our participant in this. So when they've updated the plan, I mean, he's participated in that plan and in the discussion. He didn't note for me that there was any material change in the plan this year from what has been in the past. So, we do have a copy of the plan. Again, it's apparently in electronic form.
Oh, it's a tome. I mean, it's just like War and Peace triple.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could give you more than that, but that's like.
I guess I was curious is what role like Chief maybe has in the whole plan, because it's disaster preparedness. So I was just, again,
You participate in this?
I got no problem with it. I'm just very curious of what our role in the whole county.
We have mutual aid agreements between all the law enforcement agencies. Obviously, the sheriff is, the head of the county.
Are those in the plan? Those mutual aid?
I'm sure. We operate as special deputies under the sheriff to respond to something in the county. I think it's the county's plan. We could write our own plan, but isn't that the one that we sat down maybe 4 years ago and kind of through?
I was young and enthusiastic.
We'll work in conjunction with, I'm thinking incident command, I'm thinking large scale event that happens, we're going to be working with all of our partners on that.
Right. I would just think that we probably want to know what our role is. I'm not saying that as a criticism, but probably something, all of us should probably figure
But
out.
I remember when we had like a big snowstorm, and they gave us memos, and this is what's going to happen and how it's going to happen, and we have infrastructure in the city, antennas, radio communication,
Right, yeah.
All that kind of stuff too.
Is there still a CERT program on? Do you remember, do they still do that?
What's that?
I went through it. It was Citizens Emergency Response Team. They used to, out the Sheriff's Department, they gave like the 6-week course.
Is it something we had to have for state of emergencies, the governor and snow and that kind of stuff? Is that part of the plan that we had to have? Something?
Because we had to take that training.
I mean, I did it like 10 years ago or 12 years ago or something like that.
Terrible.
Some of it was really kind of nasty, but you got a hard hat and a certificate.
Hey, sign me up. I'm free tomorrow. Let's go.
I will say that.
But it was a cool program. It taught the citizens how to be prepared.
Well, having spent from 6 o'clock to midnight last Thursday with Jefferson County Commission, that's how long those interviews, they went on till midnight. It was like 1 minute past midnight when I think the last one was held. But there was an issue that did come up on their emergency process, and it was very interesting. They were planning for what happens with all of the farm animals if there is an emergency in this county, which apparently there are a lot of farm animals and that where you have to deal with those. And so I was
Well, this
really...
program dealt with that kind of thing.
It was really the complexity of the issues that are built into these plans. So I was very impressed. And
You're saying it's electronic, is that on our website?
Maybe as a next step, let me go back and see if we can't summarize on some level, high level.
Very high level.
What the municipality's responsibilities are, and maybe pull out the table of contents as well, just give people a sense of what's in the, what kind of issues are covered as part of the emergency plan.
Was part of that, that fee that was supposed to go to the EMS service, was part of that?
So we've sorted through that a little bit more, figured out what he's referring to is the paving fee that's on the utility bill for $4.10. So a nickel goes to emergency services, a nickel goes to parks, $4 goes for street maintenance. Apparently, the way that has been dealt with in the past, and it ends up being about $1,500 a year in total collections. The way they've dealt with that in the past is actually they've treated that as if it's part of the donation. The thing we just did, the $10,000 donation that goes to the fire companies, basically. So it's more than they get under the nickel, but maybe you could make an argument we should up that a smidge to.
That's a little sketchy, to say the least.
Thank you very much.
This was researching from a previous administration, somebody who in Florida was willing to help us out with this.
Oh, I wonder where that was.
Yeah. Terrible. All right, so let's, we'll do that. We'll bring this one back with a summary and, like I said, table of contents.
Really, we're tabling this?
All right,
Pardon me?
outstanding.
We're tabling?
No, didn't we?
Oh, we have a motion and a second, so we're
A
talking.
motion and a
so-
second, we haven't
Are you
voted.
comfortable voting? I mean, he asked. what's
Yeah,
our-
but I'm
fine
comfortable
with
voting
it.
myself, but if you get, the summary was awesome, but I'm comfortable with voting for it.
Okay, good. All right.
I'd like to have that summary, too.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous. Thank you. All right, 3131, appointment of ballot commissioners.
So just one more item on this. I'm not asking for council action this evening. And the reason for that is after having done a little bit of research on the appointment of the ballot commissioners, we do need to engage the local parties to see if they have a nomination they'd like to make to the ballot board. So I have the contact information. I've sorted through this with Nikki Painter over at the county. We've checked in with the state elections board. We've talked to our legal counsel. So I want to make sure that we've...
Partisan?
It is a nonpartisan election, but again, it does spell out the process for establishing the ballot board.
Okay.
And it gives the parties an opportunity to nominate one
It's not
person.
required
So
to
again,
have them, but it's required to ask them.
yeah, so again, recognize the only thing the ballot board is going to do is it will certify, is responsible for certifying and ordering the ballots, basically how the names will appear on the ballot, and for ensuring the voting area has proper instructions and notices. So they're not necessarily,
Exciting.
well, it's not a lot of responsibility, but it is an important responsibility.
Could I ask, I mean, Nikki just got those really nice voting machines and that seemed to have worked during the last election. I mean, even my mother, who's 83, 4, seemed to really like them. Since we'd only need, one or two, is it possible for Nikki to maybe loan us one?
So on that point, if I could, we did meet, Todd Wilt and I met with Nikki Painter maybe 3 or 4 months ago about the possibility of using an electronic voting machine for the election process. Actually, there's no benefit to us doing that, because if you're less than, I think it's one precinct, you have to do a hand count to make sure that it matches what's on the ballot, what's in the electronic booth itself. So you'd still end up having to do a hand count in the city of Charlestown.
Yeah, but wouldn't be, I would think the ballots would be clearer, right?
They might, I don't.
How much clearer could they be?
5 hours waiting for the results.
It was what, past midnight? I mean, they picked the president quicker than they picked the city council.
That was an unusual year. That was an
Was it?
unusual year. Yeah, it normally isn't.
Well, and the one.
And the turnout wasn't even as big as the previous election, which happened in a much slower. You just, not all counters are created equal, and you might get challenges in there at one night, and so that.
Right.
But one thing we do anticipate doing is we would actually have and I may not be using the right term, but like a vote committee as well. So last time what happened is the absentee votes that came in advance, or the early voting that came in advance, was not counted until after all of the voting had been completed. But there is a provision where you can count those votes during the day of the election, and you can have that number ready, and then the election concludes, and then you do the hand count, the additional hand count from there. So I think that's the plan this time, would be to do it that way. So hopefully it won't be as late, because those votes would have been tabulated prior to the end of the day.
Perfect.
All right, so we'll be bringing this back on the 4th.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right. We have 3171, bills for approval.
Motion that we approve the bills.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Had a quick question. I apologize. I know it's getting late. On the